Introduction. Speaking intelligently is not a gift, it's a decision. Speaking intelligently is not a privilege reserved for a select few, nor a mystical talent that appears at birth. It's a conscious decision, a skill that can be learned, trained, and perfected. From the moment we take control of our words, the way we express ourselves, and the impact we have on others, we are paving the way to truly powerful communication. It's not about using complex words or sounding like an expert on every topic. It's about conveying ideas clearly, connecting from a place of authenticity, and generating real change in the listener. Speaking intelligently means mastering our attention, knowing when to say something and when to remain silent, understanding not only what we are saying, but also what we are feeling and what we want to provoke in the other person. Communicative intelligence surpasses verbal talent because it goes beyond fluency or superficial charisma. Talent can impress for a few minutes, but verbal intelligence transforms. Why? Because those who speak intelligently don't seek to shine for themselves, but rather to build a real bridge with their listeners. They don't focus on saying too much, but rather on saying just the right amount and what's necessary with impact, with intention, with presence. Verbal talent can fascinate, but communicative intelligence guides, inspires, resolves conflicts, and leads. In a meeting, a negotiation, a one-on-one conversation, or in front of an audience, what remains in the listener's memory is not the speaker's quick thinking, but the clarity, confidence, and the message that resonated. And yet, many people live trapped in myths about what it means to be a good communicator. One of the most common is believing that only extroverts can speak well. Nothing could be further from the truth. Being extroverted can help you speak more, but not necessarily communicate better. Speaking intelligence isn't about how much you say, but how you say it. Another dangerous myth is thinking you need sophisticated vocabulary to sound intelligent. In reality, the clearer and more accessible you are, the more impactful your message will be. Sophistication isn't about difficult words, but about emotional precision, the structure of your thought, and the intention with which you communicate. There's also the myth that you need to improvise everything to sound authentic. But authenticity doesn't mean a lack of preparation. In fact, the most natural communicators are often also the most trained. They don't improvise because they don't care. They improvise well because they've prepared beforehand. Speaking intelligently also means understanding the transformative power of a well-directed conversation. We've all experienced moments where a few words changed us from the inside out. Perhaps it was a phrase that gave us hope, a piece of advice that made us see what we couldn't see, an uncomfortable truth we needed to hear, or simply a conversation with someone who made us feel truly understood. Well-used words are tools of change. They can break down walls, rebuild relationships, open doors, and ignite wills. When a person learns to speak with intention and awareness, they become agents of transformation, not only for their own lives but also for the world around them. Imagine the impact you can have if you start speaking with greater awareness. If before every conversation you think, what do I want this person to feel? What do I want them to understand? What do I want them to do after listening to me? This prior intention makes all the difference between just talking and communicating intelligently. Conversation is no longer just an exchange of facts or emotions, but a deliberate construction of meaning. And that's what turns an ordinary conversation into an unforgettable one. Speaking intelligently is also a form of respect. Respect for your own voice, for what you have to say, and respect for the other person, who deserves to hear you clearly, honestly, and consciously. You don't need to shout to impose authority. You don't need to manipulate to convince. You don't need to dominate the space to be heard. What you need is to master yourself, your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions. From there, your communication becomes a reflection of your inner power. And when that power aligns with empathy, clarity, and coherence, there is no barrier that can resist your voice. Starting today, stop wondering if you're good at speaking. That's not the question. The question is, do you want to improve your communication skills? Because if the answer is yes, then you're looking at a skill you can develop day after day. And like any skill, the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. Your starting point doesn't matter. Your commitment does. With the right approach, you too can become a person who speaks intelligently, leads conversations, builds stronger relationships, and transforms your environment with well-spoken words. That's not a gift. It's a choice. And that choice can start now. But before continuing, please write in the comments which city you're listening to this audiobook from, and if this message resonates with you, subscribe to the channel now. This way, you'll be sure not to miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer every day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now, let's continue. Chapter 1. Clarity over complexity. The golden rule for communicating with impact. Speaking intelligently begins with a fundamental rule that every great communicator understands and applies. Clarity always trumps complexity. No matter how deep your knowledge of a subject is, if you can't express it clearly, directly, and understandably, your message is simply lost. Many people fall into the trap of using complicated words, convoluted structures, or long sentences, believing they sound smarter. But in reality, what they convey is confusion, distance, and disconnection. True speaking intelligence is measured by your ability to simplify without diminishing, to translate complex ideas into accessible messages, to speak to be understood, not to impress. When you eliminate unnecessary verbiage, you make room for real connection. Because the listener isn't expecting a parade of technical terms or a display of your mental dictionary. They're expecting you to understand, to speak directly, to explain something valuable without making them feel inferior or losing them in a tangle of words. And when you achieve that, you build trust. Because speaking clearly not only shows that you're in control of what you're saying, it also demonstrates that you respect the other person's time and attention. And that combination, control and respect, is the foundation of all powerful communication. The key to structuring clear ideas without sounding basic lies in how you organize your thoughts before speaking. Every great message has a backbone, a main idea, a concrete intention, and a common thread that guides the listener naturally. You don't need to fill your speech with embellishments if each part has a purpose. Always start by asking yourself, what do I want this person to understand at the end of what I'm going to say? Then identify the central concept and break it down into small parts. Explain step by step, as if you were leading someone by the hand. Use concrete examples, simple analogies, short sentences, and strategic pauses. Not because the other person is incapable of understanding complexity, but because showing clarity is a sign of consideration and expertise. An effective technique is to visualize your ideas as building blocks. Each block represents a key idea. And your goal is to place those blocks one on top of the other in a logical order, without leaving gaps between them, without mixing up topics, without jumping from one point to another. A clear message feels like a well-constructed staircase. Each rung leads naturally to the next, without the listener having to guess where you're leading. If you get lost in your own explanation, it's a sign that you need to organize your thoughts first before expressing them. But speaking clearly doesn't mean sounding superficial. In fact, clarity allows your depth to shine through without needing to hide it under unnecessary layers. A profound concept explained simply has more power than a complex one wrapped in obscure words. People remember what they understand. And what they remember, they can apply. That's why, if you want to truly influence, you need to simplify. Not to reduce the value of your message, but to amplify its effect. Now, how do you train this ability? The most powerful practice you can adopt is the mental filter. Before speaking, ask yourself, is what I'm about to say essential? Can I say it in fewer words? Is it clear to someone who knows nothing about the subject? This filter forces you to refine. And what's left, after applying this filter, is usually pure gold, direct, useful, and memorable. Another effective practice is explaining your ideas to different types of people. If you can explain something to a child, a friend, and a professional on the subject with the same level of clarity, but tailored to each audience, then you are truly understanding what you're saying. Because deep understanding enables adaptability. You can also practice clarity in writing. Before giving a presentation or having an important conversation, write down your idea in a paragraph. Then try reducing it to 3 sentences. Then, to a single sentence. This process forces you to find the essence, to refine the message, to get to the heart of what really matters. The clearer that core is, the more powerful your communication will be when you express it. Remember, when you yourself have doubts about what you're going to say, the listener senses it. But when you are certain, that clarity is transmitted and creates an immediate impact. Another useful exercise is to listen to great communicators, not just for what they say, but for how they say it. Observe how they use pauses, how they organize their thoughts, how they ask questions that activate the listener's mind. Analyze speeches, interviews, and talks, and repeat parts of them out loud to train your timing, your structure, and your ability to bring an idea to life with simplicity. Clarity is a muscular skill, strengthened with conscious repetition. When you make clarity your priority, everything about your communication improves. People listen more closely. Your ideas are better understood. Your relationships deepen. Your presentations become memorable. It's not about talking more, but about saying just the right amount of power. It's not about sounding perfect, but about being useful, precise, and authentic. Speaking clearly isn't just another technique. It's a philosophy. It's the decision not to hide behind empty words, not to embellish what needs no embellishment, to trust that simplicity can be profoundly transformative. And if you've made it this far, you're already one step ahead. Because most people still believe that speaking well is speaking complicatedly. But you already know otherwise. That speaking intelligently is, above all, speaking clearly. And that when you simplify with intention, when you structure with logic, and when you connect from the essential, your message isn't just heard. It stays, it's felt, it's transformed. And that's what differentiates someone who simply speaks from someone who communicates with impact. Chapter 2, Verbal Presence. How to speak and be really heard. Verbal presence doesn't depend on how much you speak, or even what you say exactly, but on how you say it and how you make your listener feel. It's that almost invisible power some people have to effortlessly command attention, to fill a space with their voice without raising it, to convey confidence without seeming arrogant. Communicative presence is a blend of energy, focus, and awareness of the present moment. When you speak with presence, your message doesn't go unnoticed. People stop, listen, and sense that there's something different about you. It's not empty charisma or forced theatricality. It's a deep connection with your words and your purpose in speaking. Developing that presence isn't a matter of luck. It's training, it's intention, it's self-knowledge. To begin, you have to learn to inhabit every word you say. That means speaking from a state of total attention, not as someone repeating something you've learned, but as someone who discovers what they're saying as they say it. When you're truly present when you communicate, each word carries your energy, your emotion, your focused attention. And you can feel it. People sense when someone is fully present, when they're not just talking for the sake of talking, but because they truly have something to share. Presence is built from the moment you choose to be present, without mental distractions, without thinking about what you'll say next, without fear of making a mistake. Just being. A simple but powerful technique for developing communicative presence is to breathe before you speak. Not an automatic breath, but a conscious, deep one that connects you with your body and grounds you in the moment. That initial pause has an immediate effect. It stabilizes you internally and captures external attention. Because in a fast-paced world, someone who takes a second to breathe before speaking exudes natural authority. They don't need to shout. They don't need to impose themselves. They just need to be completely there. From that place, every word that comes out has more power, more clarity, and more impact. It's also crucial to learn to project your voice not from your throat, but from your entire body. A voice with presence comes from your center, your chest, your abdomen. From that place where you feel you're speaking from within. When your voice is supported by your breathing and your posture, you don't need to force it. It comes out naturally, firmly, at the right volume, and with a connecting vibration. People remember how you made them feel, and your voice is a more powerful emotional tool than you imagine. Learn to use it with intention, with varying tone, with well-placed pauses, and you'll see how your message ceases to be just information and becomes an experience. Capturing attention from the first sentence isn't a matter of luck or being good at speaking. It's about strategy and preparation. The first sentence you speak in a conversation, presentation, or public appearance is like opening the door to your world. If that door doesn't spark curiosity, if it doesn't generate immediate connection or interest, you'll lose your audience in the first few seconds. Therefore, a very effective technique is to start with something that breaks the usual pattern. You can use a thought-provoking question, an unexpected statement, a short story that connects with the emotion, or even an intentional silence before speaking. The important thing is that what you say invites them to be present, to want to continue listening, to generate an internal reaction in the person listening. But capturing attention doesn't mean making noise. It means provoking mutual presence. And to do that, you need to understand the power of tone, pause, and intention. The tone you use can completely change the meaning of your words. The same message can sound like an order, an invitation, a reflection, or a threat, just by changing the tone. Learn to modulate your tone depending on the context, the emotion you want to provoke, and the type of connection you're seeking. It's not about faking voices, but about learning to use the natural musicality of your language as a tool for emotional connection. Pausing is one of the best-kept secrets of great communicators. When you know how to pause at the right moment, you create space for your words to breathe. The pause gives weight to what you said before and sets the stage for what comes next. Strategic silence isn't empty. It's presence in its purest form. It makes you appear confident, gives you time to think, and gives the listener time to process. It's in the pause that the message penetrates most deeply, where the impact settles, where the other person truly feels what you're saying. And most importantly, the pause is the antidote to accelerated, nervous speech. Whoever allows themselves to pause demonstrates mastery. And then there's intention. Intention is the soul of your message. No matter how well-structured your speech is, if your intention isn't clear, the message is diluted. Before speaking, ask yourself, why do I want to say this? What do I want to provoke? What do I want this person to feel or think after hearing me? That inner clarity transforms all your language, verbal and nonverbal. A phrase spoken with clear intention reaches the heart. A phrase without intention is forgotten. Intention gives emotional direction to your words, and the audience feels it, even without you saying it directly. Developing verbal presence means committing to being whole in every word. It means stopping speaking out of inertia and starting to speak with awareness. It means replacing the need to impress with a desire to connect. It means understanding that your voice has weight, and that you can use it to build, to inspire, to guide. And that power doesn't depend on changing who you are, but on beginning to use what you already have with more attention, with more direction, with more honesty. Because in the end, speaking with presence isn't a matter of technique alone, but of being truly willing to be heard. And to be heard, you must first listen to yourself. Feel what you say. Inhabit your ideas. Understand that every word that comes out of you has the potential to touch, transform, or awaken something in others. When you learn to be present in your voice, your body, and your intention, the difference is evident. You don't need to justify yourself, over-explain, or force anything. You just speak, and people listen. And when that happens, you know you're not communicating from the surface, but from the core. From there, your words have direction, your tone has soul, your pause has power, and your message becomes unforgettable. That's verbal presence. That's what begins to change everything. Chapter 3. Authenticity as a weapon of influence. Authenticity is, without a doubt, one of the most powerful elements of effective communication. And yet, it's also one of the most misunderstood. Many people believe that being authentic is simply speaking their mind without a filter or acting as they are in any circumstance, without considering the context, the emotions they convey, or the impact they make. But true communicative authenticity isn't about impulsiveness or raw sincerity, but about coherence. Coherence between what you think, what you feel, and what you express. When you speak from a genuine place, where your words reflect your truth, your experience, and your values, you generate an immediate connection with your listener. Because people don't respond just to words, but to the emotional energy behind them. And that energy only flows powerfully when what you say comes from an authentic place, not from a mask, a pose, or a persona. Being yourself enhances persuasion because it breaks down barriers of mistrust. In a world filled with rehearsed speeches, polished facades, and artificial messages, authenticity shines like a different light. It's that moment when the listener feels like you're not selling them anything, that you're not manipulating them, that you're simply sharing a truth that's real to you. And that level of truth, when communicated with clarity and purpose, becomes irresistible. Because people don't want perfection, they want connection. They don't want you speaking to them from the top of a tower. They want you to speak to them from the very ground they stand on, with the same humanity that inhabits them. And that can only be achieved when you dare to stop pretending and decide to communicate from your essence. Now, authenticity doesn't mean saying everything or showing everything. There's a key difference between verbal vulnerability and undirected emotional intensity. Being vulnerable when communicating isn't about carelessly exposing yourself, or publicly catharsis, or opening wounds to gain attention. True vulnerability is the ability to show your humanity with purpose. It's talking about your mistakes not to seek sympathy, but to teach. It's sharing your doubts not to receive approval, but to generate empathy. It's accepting that you don't have all the answers, yet still offering your voice firmly. That is the vulnerability that connects, that persuades, that transforms. On the other hand, emotional exaggeration can have the opposite effect. When you take your emotions to the extreme in an attempt to create an impact, you risk losing credibility. Because what moves is not the dramatic, but the honest. People sense when something is overacted, forced, or out of proportion. And in those moments, the message loses its force. Authenticity requires emotional balance. It requires knowing how to feel, but also knowing how to channel what you feel in a way that builds, not overwhelms. Emotional intelligence is key here. It's about recognizing your emotions, regulating them when necessary, and expressing them consciously to strengthen your message, not overshadow it. Projecting authenticity with emotional intelligence begins with inner work. You can't speak authentically if you don't know yourself. You can't connect with others if you're not connected to yourself. And that's why the first step is to observe yourself. What topics are you truly passionate about? What personal stories have defined your way of seeing the world? What values move you when you speak? What emotions do you usually feel when expressing yourself? Answering these questions isn't just an exercise in introspection. It's an act of communicative responsibility. Because the clearer you are about who you are and what you stand for, the easier it is to communicate truthfully. Authenticity isn't fixed, nor is it perfect. It's not about maintaining a rigid emotional stance in all situations, but rather being aligned with yourself at all times, even when you're changing. Therefore, communicating authentically also involves acknowledging your evolution. Don't be afraid to say, "I used to think differently," or "This is what I've learned over time." This humility communicates more than 1,000 arguments. Because it shows that you're in process, that you're alive, that you're willing to grow. And that generates a human closeness that no persuasion technique can replace. A practical way to project authenticity in any conversation is to speak from experience, not just from knowledge. When you share what you've lived, what you've felt, what you've experienced firsthand, your words carry an emotional charge that the listener immediately perceives. You can repeat ideas from a book, but if they're not connected to your personal experience, they'll sound hollow. On the other hand, if you speak from what you know because you've experienced it, each word feels truer, more solid, more credible. Another powerful tool is congruent language. Your body, your tone, and your words should all speak the same language. You can't speak enthusiasm with a subdued voice. You can't speak honesty with a shifty gaze. You can't speak confidence with a slumped posture. Congruence is the mirror of authenticity. When your whole being communicates the same thing, people don't just listen to you, they believe you. And when they believe you, they follow you, respect you, and allow you to influence. That is communicative leadership from an authentic perspective. And finally, remember this: authenticity isn't practice to please, it's practice to impact. It's not about being liked by everyone, but about being so consistent with yourself that you inspire others to do the same. When you speak from an authentic place, you don't need to compete, convince, or impress. Your very presence generates a different resonance, because you are aligned with your inner voice. And when a person finds that alignment, their communication ceases to be just a means and becomes a message in itself. In a world where so many pretend, feign, or hide behind empty rhetoric, being authentic is a form of intelligent rebellion. It means telling the world, "This is who I am, this is what I feel, this is what I believe." And if you have the courage to do so with emotional intelligence, purpose, and respect, you will discover that people not only listen to you, but they trust you, open up to you, and allow your words to leave a real mark on their lives. Because authenticity, when properly directed, not only connects, it transforms. And that transformation begins when you choose to stop speaking as others expect, and start speaking from where you truly are. Chapter 4. The Inner Speaker. Unlock your true voice. We all carry a voice within us. A voice that knows how to express ourselves, that has something important to say, that can communicate with clarity, impact, and presence. But throughout life, that voice often gets buried under layers of judgment, insecurity, fear, and conditioning. The inner speaker is not an external figure, a fictional character, or a talent reserved for a select few. It's your innate ability to communicate authentically, with inner strength, with true confidence. Unlocking that voice isn't a magic trick. It's a process of reconnection. And that process begins when you stop to observe what's happening inside you every time you speak. Because before you even say a word out loud, you're already speaking internally. Your thoughts speak to you, interrupt you, judge you. And often, the biggest saboteur of your communication isn't the audience, the environment, or the topic, but the internal dialogue you maintain with yourself. This dialogue is often so automatic that you don't even realize the damage it causes. What if I'm wrong? What if they laugh at me? I have nothing important to say. You've already heard this. I'd better keep quiet. These phrases, which seem like minor doubts, have a powerful effect. They silence your voice, cloud your message, and break your connection with yourself and with others. Therefore, the first step to unlocking your true voice is to identify those mental dialogues that sabotage your way of speaking. Listen to them. Write them down if necessary. Name them. When you make them conscious, they cease to have automatic power over you. The key is not to fight them, but to intelligently question them. Ask yourself, is what I'm telling myself really true? Where does this idea come from? What evidence do I have that what I fear will actually happen? Many times you'll discover that this internal fear is based on misinterpreted past experiences, old criticisms you accepted as truth, or limiting beliefs that never belonged to you. The mere fact of challenging them begins to free up space for your true voice to emerge. Reconnecting with your communicating self isn't about creating an artificial version of yourself. It's about remembering who you were before you started falling silent. It's about returning to your roots, to the moment when you spoke freely, with curiosity, with a genuine desire to share. We were all born communicators at some point. When we were children, when we told stories without fear, when we expressed ideas without thinking about external judgment. That voice still lives inside you, even if it's now covered in layers. And to reconnect with it, you need to stop focusing so much on how you look and start focusing on what you want to convey. Because when intention is stronger than fear, the voice begins to be liberated. One of the most effective exercises for this process is conscious visualization. Sit in a quiet space, close your eyes, and visualize yourself speaking in a situation that normally makes you uncomfortable. It could be in front of an audience, in a difficult conversation, or defending your point of view. But instead of imagining yourself nervous or failing, visualize yourself firmly, calmly, and clearly. Notice how you breathe, how you move, how you sound. Connect with that version of yourself that already knows how to speak from its center. This practice isn't just imaginative. It's a way of training your mind to create a new internal reference. The more you repeat this image, the more accessible it becomes to your body and nervous system when the time actually comes to speak. Another valuable exercise is the verbal journal. Every day, spend a few minutes writing down your thoughts about your communication style. Ask yourself, what prevented me from expressing myself the way I wanted today? When was the moment I felt most authentic? What would I like to say more freely? Writing allows you to release internal tensions, organize your thoughts, and discover patterns you didn't see when you were just thinking. Plus, reading your own reflections over time shows you the progress you're making. Because speaking well isn't just about what you do in public. It's also the dialogue you have with yourself in private. You can also practice recording yourself. Take your phone, choose a topic you're passionate about or a personal story, and speak it out loud while recording yourself. Don't do this to evaluate your performance, but rather to listen to yourself carefully. Then observe. How does your voice sound when you're talking about something important to you? At what points do you disconnect? Where do you interrupt or sabotage yourself? This exercise helps you develop awareness of your tone, your rhythm, and your confidence. But above all, it allows you to discover the beauty of your true voice, unadorned and unfiltered. Listening to yourself without judgment is an act of deep reconnection with your communicative self. Unlocking your true voice also means stopping waiting for external approval to validate what you have to say. Your message doesn't need permission to be valid. It needs internal conviction. When you speak from your truth, from your experience, from your genuine intention to add value, your voice grows stronger on its own. There's no need to exaggerate, to pretend, to copy others. Because your authenticity is your competitive advantage. No one can speak from your story the way you would. No one can transmit your energy if you don't unleash it first. And that act of liberation begins when you stop hiding behind mental excuses and choose to speak from your heart. It's not about perfection. It's about expression. It's about allowing yourself to be present with what you have today, with the voice that already lives within you, with the message waiting to be heard. The inner speaker isn't a persona you must build. It's a part of you you must reclaim. It's the you who knows when to speak assertively, when to be silent with intention, when to say a word that changes the course of a conversation. And the more you practice it, the stronger that part becomes. More accessible. More natural. Speaking with your true voice is an act of courage and self-love. Courage because it requires facing the fears you've accumulated. Love because it means giving yourself permission to be heard just as you are. When you unlock your voice, you unlock a fundamental part of your personal power. And from that power, your communication ceases to be a technique and becomes a tool for transformation. Because you no longer speak to impress, you speak to inspire. You no longer speak for validation. You speak because you know your voice has something to say. And when you speak like this, it doesn't matter if the audience is 1 or 1,000. Your message gets through. And that, in essence, is what your inner speaker has always wanted to do. Express itself, contribute, connect. It just needed you to open the door. Chapter 5. Speaking with Calmness and Power. The balance that commands respect. Speaking calmly and powerfully is a skill that distinguishes great communicators. It's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Serenity is not synonymous with weakness, and firmness doesn't mean shouting. Communicating calmly without losing authority is an art built on self-control, mental clarity, and inner security. When a person speaks calmly in a tense situation, they radiate emotional mastery. That calmness projects an image of someone who is in control, not only of the situation, but also of themselves. And that perception generates immediate respect. A calm voice is perceived as trustworthy, while a raised voice is often interpreted as insecure or out of control. Therefore, one of the most powerful ways to command authority is not to raise your voice, but to lower it with intention, with emotional weight, and with total presence. Strategic silence is an underrated tool. A well-placed pause can have more impact than an entire paragraph. Silence conveys reflection, intelligence, and mastery. When you pause before responding, you send a clear message. You're thinking. You're not reacting, you're responding. And that's invaluable. Pauses also elevate the value of what you're about to say. They create anticipation. In a world where everyone talks non-stop, whoever pauses to think, whoever controls the pace of the conversation, automatically takes control of the moment. You don't need to fill every second with words. Sometimes, a silence after a powerful statement acts as an emotional underscore that imprints your words on the listener's mind. But to master the balance between calm and power, you need to train your mind to maintain serenity in difficult moments. Tense conversations are inevitable. Arguments, criticisms, disagreements. These are where your ability to speak with emotional intelligence is tested. The first step is to observe your breathing. When the conversation escalates, your body tends to tense and you're breathing shallowly. At that moment, take a deep breath. This conscious breathing brings you back to the present and helps you think clearly. The second step is not to take anything personally. Whoever gets upset loses. If you react impulsively, you disempower yourself. But if you keep your tone firm, calm, and clear, you maintain your authority without descending into emotional confrontation. It's a dance between firmness and restraint. Furthermore, calmness is fueled by preparation. The more prepared you are for an important conversation, the calmer you'll be when you face it. Rehearsing your arguments, anticipating objections, and knowing your limits. All of this gives you a firm foundation from which to speak. Those who feel confident in what they think don't need to shout it out. They speak with conviction, without nervousness. They speak with pauses, without fear of silence. and they convey their message with the weight of someone who knows their words matter. And something very important. Speaking calmly doesn't mean speaking without passion. You can be passionate without being impulsive. You can be firm without being aggressive. The key is balance. When emotion combines with reason, it becomes conviction. And that conviction, expressed with serenity and power, has the effect of a voice that cuts through the noise and stays in the memory. When others turn up the volume, you slow down. When others shout, you choose silence. That contrast makes you a beacon of clarity amidst the chaos. Mastering this way of speaking takes practice. Observe great communicators, leaders, negotiators, teachers. You'll notice they never rush. They think. They pause. They breathe. They don't seek to be the loudest, but the clearest. And that clarity is born of inner mastery. The more you learn to calm your mind, the more powerful your voice becomes. Because a calm mind produces wise words, and wise words, spoken calmly, have the ability to change the course of any conversation. That is the balance that commands respect. Not force, but emotional stability. Not noise, but clarity. Not reaction, but presence. And whoever masters that art commands any room, any discussion, any stage. Chapter 6. Influencing without manipulating. The psychology of mutual respect. Influencing without manipulating is one of the most powerful and rare skills in the world of communication. Most people associate persuasion with aggressive strategies, impositions, or hidden tactics that appeal to fear, urgency, or guilt. But in reality, true influence isn't born from control, but from mutual respect and a deep understanding of the other person's needs. When you learn to communicate from this place, you no longer need to convince. You simply invite, inspire, and open up possibilities that others willingly pursue. This type of persuasion has deeper roots because it not only generates action, but also loyalty, connection, and trust. To persuade from an ethical and understanding perspective, the first thing you must do is abandon the win mentality. Effective communication isn't about imposing a point of view, but about finding bridges where both parties feel seen and valued. When you understand the other person's values, interests, and motivations, you can adapt your message so that it connects with their inner world. This isn't manipulation. It's strategic empathy. You're not changing the truth. You're adjusting the way you present it to maximize understanding and resonance. And for that to be possible, you need to listen as much as you speak, validate as much as you argue, and compromise as much as you propose. One of the most powerful strategies for motivating without pressure is to ask questions instead of giving orders. Well-formulated questions not only generate reflection, but also empower the person speaking to them, inviting them to think, decide for themselves, and take ownership of their choice. Instead of saying, "You should do this," try, "What would happen if you tried this?" Or, "How would you feel if you took that step?" This subtlety completely changes the dynamic of the conversation. Instead of feeling like they're being directed, others feel like they're autonomously discovering solutions. And when the decision is their own, the action is stronger, more sustained, and more authentic. The principle of reciprocity is also a powerful driver of ethical influence. People tend to respond positively when they perceive genuine generosity. When you give first, whether it's attention, support, recognition, or selfless help, you create a positive emotional debt. But the key here is not to expect an immediate return. Real influence is born when you deliver value without demanding it in return, when you give because you understand that's your nature, not because you expect a result. Paradoxically, it is precisely this attitude that generates more openness, more connection, and more willingness in others to listen to you, follow you, or support you when the time comes. A persuasive conversation also requires clarity of intent. It's not enough to be right. You need your message to be purposeful. Why are you communicating this? What change do you want to bring about, and why is it important? People sense when you speak from conviction and integrity. If your message is aligned with your values and the good of both, the impact will be profound. But if you're just defending a personal interest disguised as good intentions, sooner or later it will be noticed. Ethical influence requires transparency, consistency, and a genuine willingness to build, not conquer. Likewise, it's essential to understand the difference between influence and manipulation. Manipulation seeks personal benefit regardless of the effects on others. It's based on deception, control, and pressure. True influence, on the other hand, seeks shared benefit, always respecting the autonomy, dignity, and will of the other. It's a dance, not an imposition. It's an invitation, not a trap. And it feels light, fluid, almost natural, because both parties are co-creating something greater than their individual interests. To practice this conscious influence, it's helpful to pay attention to your nonverbal language. Consistency between what you say and how you say it is vital. A calm tone, a direct gaze, an open posture, and gestures aligned with your words reinforce credibility and trust. If your body contradicts your message, you'll lose power. On the other hand, if you project confidence without aggression, firmness without harshness, and openness without submission, you'll be sending a clear signal. I'm here to connect, not to dominate. That energy is felt, respected, and responded to with openness. Finally, remember that the most lasting influence comes from your example. Words convince, but behavior drags. If you want to influence with respect, you must first be respectful. If you want to build trust, be trustworthy. If you hope to motivate others, stay motivated yourself. You can't ask for what you're not willing to give. And when you live your life, your presence becomes a powerful message, even before you open your mouth. In that state, you no longer need complicated strategies. Your authenticity, clarity, and intention are enough to transform an ordinary conversation into an experience that inspires, connects, and transforms. Chapter 7. Smart Body Language. Your voice moves too. The body speaks before words. Even before you utter a single syllable, your body language has already sent a clear message about your confidence, your emotional state, your intention, and your disposition. Often, what prevents your message from being persuasive or credible isn't what you say, but how you say it. And in that how, the body plays a crucial role. Intelligent body language isn't forced or artificial. It's conscious, coherent, and aligned with your words. When you achieve that synchronization between gesture and speech, your communication acquires an invisible but powerful force that captures attention, builds trust, and conveys leadership. Posture is the foundation of that body language. It's not simply about standing up straight, but about projecting presence. An open, firm, and relaxed posture conveys inner security. If you slouch or shrink back, your body is sending a signal of doubt, defensiveness, or low energy. On the other hand, if you occupy your space naturally, if you stand balanced on your feet and allow your torso to breathe freely, you are saying, I am here, I am worthy of being heard, and I have nothing to hide. That posture alone has a psychological effect on you and on those who observe you. You feel stronger, more focused, more capable. And others perceive you as someone they can trust. The eyes are also a key tool of nonverbal communication. The gaze sustains human contact beyond words. A person who avoids eye contact conveys insecurity or disconnection. But a gaze that remains attentive, gentle, and firm at the same time generates a deep connection. You don't need to stare or intimidate. It's about being present with the other person through your eyes, as if saying with them, I'm with you, I'm listening, this matters to me. That gaze generates mutual respect and reinforces the perception of authenticity. Furthermore, your eyes also reveal emotions even when you're not speaking. A micro-expression of doubt, a spark of enthusiasm, a look of concern. Whoever learns to master and read these signals masters an entire channel of silent communication. Your hands are another silent but incredibly expressive ally. It's not about moving them for the sake of moving them, but rather using them as an extension of your ideas. Your hands can underline an emotion, mark a pause, point in a direction, or hold an idea in the air. When your hands accompany your speech naturally and fluidly, your message gains clarity and energy. On the other hand, if you keep them rigid, hidden, or wave them uncontrollably, you introduce noise and incoherence. The key is to ensure that each gesture has intention, that your hands reinforce what your voice is saying. For example, by opening your palms upward, you project openness and sincerity. By pointing a finger, you can sound accusatory or dominant. By bringing your fingertips together, you can convey control and reflection. Every gesture has its impact, and by consciously making it your own, you become a more powerful communicator. But body language isn't just about what you project. It's also about what you observe in others. The ability to read people's nonverbal cues gives you a strategic advantage in any interaction. If you know how to recognize microgestures, defensive postures, hidden discomfort, or quiet enthusiasm, you can adjust your message in real time to better connect. For example, if someone crosses their arms while you're speaking, they may be defensive or uncomfortable. If they look down or play with their hands, they may be insecure. If they lean their body toward you, they're interested. These subtle details reveal truths that words don't. And if you observe them with empathy, not judgment, you can adapt your energy, your language, and your approach to keep the connection alive. This level of nonverbal reading requires practice and presence. It's not about obsessively analyzing every movement, but rather developing a finer sensitivity to the entire communication. When you're attentive not only to the words but also to the tone, rhythm, silences, and gestures, you can interpret the true message behind each sentence. And this ability not only makes you more socially intelligent, but also more human, more capable of connecting from an authentic perspective. There's a fundamental principle in nonverbal communication that you must deeply integrate: congruence. When your body language contradicts your words, your body wins. You can say you're calm, but if your shoulders are tense and your eyebrows furrowed, no one will believe you. You can claim to be confident in your proposal, but if your voice trembles and your hands shake, you'll lose authority. Congruence between what you feel, what you think, and what you project is the foundation of powerful communication. Therefore, the work doesn't begin with gestures, but with your internal state. When you're aligned internally, your body naturally reflects it. A very useful exercise to align your body with your voice is to record yourself on video. Observe how you speak, how you move, what you express without words. Does your posture convey confidence? Do your hands support your ideas? Does your face reflect your true emotions? Don't criticize yourself. Observe yourself with curiosity. Then, start making small adjustments. Improve your posture, relax your face, make intentional eye contact. Little by little, you'll notice how your body becomes an amplifier of your message. And when that happens, your presence transforms. You no longer need to try so hard to convince. Your energy alone communicates authority, clarity, and confidence. Intelligent body language also involves knowing when not to move. Sometimes the most powerful gesture is stillness. When you pause with your body, you create a space that generates positive tension, focus, and attention. In a difficult conversation, maintaining a firm, calm posture conveys emotional mastery. In a presentation, pausing without moving and looking at the audience for a few seconds can be more impactful than 1,000 words. Controlled stillness is not passivity, it's presence. It's a kind of language that says, "I'm here in control, with no need to impress." Ultimately, your body is as important a communication channel as your voice. You can't separate what you say from how you say it. And when you learn to move your body with intention, to look carefully, to gesture coherently, you become clearer, more trustworthy, and more influential. Your message ceases to be just a verbal construct and becomes a complete experience for your listener. And that's what makes the difference between an ordinary conversation and one that leaves an impact. Between someone who speaks and someone who truly communicates. Chapter 8. Intelligent Listening. The True Power of a Good Communicator. Listening isn't simply staying silent while the other person speaks. Listening intelligently is an active action, a demonstration of mindfulness, emotional reading, and communicative intuition. The great secret that true masters of communication know is that power lies not in the one who speaks the most, but in the one who listens the best. Because those who listen intentionally can see what others don't say, can understand what is hidden between words, and, most importantly, can respond with a precision that transforms conversation into real connection. Listening intelligently is, in essence, the key to subtle and respectful influence. It involves knowing where to focus your attention, how to read gestures, how to notice silences, how to interpret nuances. And all of this can be learned. When you develop the art of active listening, you change your role in conversations. From passive participant to emotional architect. You don't just hear, you build. Active listening means maintaining eye contact, eliminating distractions, nodding naturally, and demonstrating with your body language that you are fully present. That is, with your body, "I'm really listening to you." But beyond that, active listening involves a conscious mental effort, filtering out judgments, postponing automatic responses, and observing the full message, not just the literal content. People feel valued when they are heard without interruption, when they notice that the other person isn't waiting for their turn to speak, but rather understanding what they truly want to say. Responding accurately is a natural consequence of good listening. It's not about improvising or filling the silence with whatever comes to mind. It's about responding from a deep understanding of what the other person is trying to communicate. Often, what people say isn't exactly what they need to express. This is where intelligent listening becomes a highly valuable skill. You can pick up on hidden concerns, detect camouflaged insecurities, or notice enthusiasm where the other person barely expresses it. Accurate response doesn't come from talking too much, but from saying exactly what resonates with the other person, which shows them that they've been understood beyond their words. At that moment, your communication ceases to be superficial and becomes truly powerful. The tools for reading between the lines are skills that anyone can develop if they decide to train their mind to observe beyond the obvious. It all starts with observation. Emotions are rarely completely hidden. They seep into micro-gestures, changes in tone, pauses, and subtle expressions. Learning to read these details requires attention and practice. But even more so, it requires genuine interest in others. Because you can't read between the lines if you don't care about what the other person is saying. Empathy becomes your greatest ally here. When you are truly interested in another person's inner world, you begin to notice patterns, identify inconsistencies, and detect hidden truths. And this implicit knowledge allows you to communicate with a sensitivity that disarms defenses and builds trust. A good communicator isn't obsessed with impressing. They focus on understanding first. Because they know that those who understand influence, and those who listen deeply impact. Listening intelligently doesn't mean staying silent. It means maintaining internal silence so you can receive clearly. It means taking the time to process what you hear before speaking. It means asking yourself, what is this person feeling? What do they really need? What message is underlying their words? Only with that foundation can you build responses that heal, inspire, and connect. Intelligent listening is, ultimately, a higher form of respect. And respect generates reciprocity. When you listen attentively, the other person inevitably opens up to listening to you as well. This is how intelligent communication is built, not through imposition, but through attentive reciprocity. And that kind of communication not only makes you more persuasive, but also makes you more human. Chapter 9. Inner Security. How to speak confidently even when you're afraid. Speaking with confidence isn't a skill reserved for extroverts, charismatics, or those who always have the right words. Speaking with confidence, even when you feel fear, is a trainable ability born of an internal transformation. We've all experienced that lump in our throat, that cold sweat, or that mental emptiness when faced with a situation in which we must speak in public or simply express an idea to others. That stage fright or social anxiety isn't a sign of weakness, but rather an automatic reaction of the nervous system to exposure. The key is learning to regulate this internal response so that it doesn't determine our performance, because fear can be managed, and confidence can be built. The origin of stage fright often lies in emotional conditioning. Past experiences where speaking generated shame, rejection, or ridicule. The mind stores this information as if it were a real danger. Therefore, when we are about to speak, the body responds with anxiety. But understanding this is the first step to changing it. Fear is a signal, not a sentence. It is the manifestation of a mind anticipating a possible danger, not an imminent reality. Instead of fighting that fear, what you must do is recognize it and then redirect your attention. Attention is the most powerful weapon against fear. When you stop focusing on yourself and start focusing on the message you want to convey, fear loses its power. When your purpose is greater than your fear, your confidence begins to emerge. Before speaking, it's essential to regulate your nervous system. One of the most effective techniques is conscious breathing. Don't underestimate the power of deep, controlled breathing. 3 slow, deep inhalations, exhaling twice as long as you inhale, have the ability to calm the sympathetic nervous system and activate the relaxation response. It's like telling your body, we're safe. You can also use pre-visualizations, imagining yourself speaking clearly and being listened to respectfully. This type of mental practice reprograms the neural pathways associated with public speaking. Another powerful tool is body anchoring, changing your physiology to change your mental state. If you stand tall, with your feet planted, your chest open, and your head held high, you're sending signals to your mind that you're ready, even if you don't feel it at first. Your body can teach your brain how to feel safe. But true confidence comes from within. It doesn't matter how much you practice your posture or how you modify your tone of voice if you feel inadequate internally. That's why it's key to work on your internal dialogue. Observe how you speak to yourself before an important intervention. Do you tell yourself that you're going to make mistakes? That you're not good enough? That no one will take you seriously? This internal dialogue is like a hidden script that directs your behavior. To speak with confidence, you must first speak to yourself with compassion. Replace those thoughts with powerful affirmations like, "My voice has value. I am here to contribute. I don't have to be perfect, just authentic." This mental reprogramming isn't instantaneous, but with conscious repetition, it transforms your self-perception. You must also understand that confidence doesn't mean the absence of nerves. Even great speakers feel nervous before speaking. The difference is that they don't interpret it as a threat, but as energy. That energy is fuel for presence. When you're nervous, it means you care. Use it to your advantage. Instead of resisting it, breathe it in, channel it, transform it into intention. Speaking with confidence isn't about speaking loudly or dominating others with words. It's about communicating from an inner certainty that comes from knowing yourself, respecting yourself, and recognizing that your message is worth sharing. That confidence is felt when you align yourself with your truth, when you don't seek to impress but to express. If you feel fear, don't hide. Train yourself. Put yourself in small but constant situations where you have to speak. Put your voice out there in daily conversations, in safe spaces. Each micro-action strengthens your confidence muscle. And over time, what once paralyzed you becomes an opportunity to expand. Speaking with confidence isn't a destination, it's a practice. And every time you choose to speak despite the fear, you're reprogramming your mind to know that you can. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. The world needs more real voices, not flawless speeches. Your voice, with its humanity, its emotion, and its truth, can inspire, heal, and move. But only if you choose to use it, even in fear. Because that's where true transformation begins. Chapter 10. The Voice as a Tool of Psychological Influence. The voice is more than just a sound we make when we speak. It's an instrument of profound psychological influence. Through it, we convey not only information, but also emotion, authority, confidence, and connection. Whoever masters their voice masters its impact. And yet, very few people truly train in the conscious use of their voice. They believe that content is enough, without understanding that the way they say it can multiply or destroy its effect. The voice has the power to open or close doors, to relax or tense environments, to connect with the heart or generate rejection. And this power lies within each of us. It's not about having a perfect voice, but a trained and conscious voice. A voice that knows how to modulate tone, rhythm, and volume according to the communicative purpose. Because that's where true influence lies, in using the voice not only to speak, but to touch the mind and emotions of others. Tone of voice, for example, is one of the most overlooked, yet most powerful elements of communication. It's not just about sounding kind or harsh, but about understanding that tone creates an immediate, unconscious impression. The same message can sound inspiring or arrogant, depending on the tone in which it's delivered. Therefore, training your tone means training the emotional impact of your words. A deep tone, used with presence, can project confidence and leadership. A warm, enveloping tone can convey trust and closeness. And a serene tone, without rigidity or exaggeration, has the ability to calm, especially in high-tension situations. The secret is to choose your tone based on the effect you want to achieve, not based on how you feel at the moment. Rhythm is another of the great pillars of a persuasive voice. Speaking too fast generates anxiety in the listener. Speaking too slowly, without internal rhythm, can lead to boredom or disengagement. The ideal rhythm is one that allows the message to breathe, the ideas to settle, and the listener to feel you are guiding them clearly. But you can also use rhythm variations strategically. Speed up in moments of enthusiasm to convey energy, and then slow down at key points to add weight and impact. This rhythmic dance between speed and pause gives your voice narrative power. And most importantly, it generates presence. Because a monotonous voice, without rhythm variation, becomes background noise. But a lively voice, one that adapts to the moment, becomes a tool for attention and recall. Volume, on the other hand, is projected energy. Speaking too softly can denote insecurity or disconnection. Speaking too loudly all the time can seem aggressive. But knowing how to raise your volume with intention at a key moment can electrify the room. And knowing how to lower it just before a powerful idea can force everyone to lean in and listen. Because volume also creates contrast, and contrast creates impact. The essential thing is that your volume always connects with the emotional intention of the message. And for that, you first need to connect with your body. A strong voice doesn't come from the throat, but from the diaphragm. From conscious abdominal breathing, which projects without forcing. Therefore, the first step to mastering your voice is mastering your breathing. And that can be trained. A concrete way to train your vocal power is through simple but powerful exercises. For example, the humming exercise. Closing your mouth and emitting a sustained M with vibration in your lips and face allows you to warm up your vocal cords and feel the resonance. Another effective exercise is to read a text aloud slowly, marking each word with intention. This forces you to become aware of rhythm, pause, and intention. You can also record yourself reading the same message in different tones. One authoritative, another empathetic, another inspiring. Then listen to them and analyze which one generates the greatest emotional impact. The key is to begin to recognize that your voice is not something fixed, but malleable. That you have options. And that the more you play with your voice, the more tools you develop to influence through nonverbal language. If you want to move an audience, it's not enough to have a moving speech. You must convey that emotion with your voice. Let the emotion live in your body before you speak. If you want to inspire, allow the energy of your vision to be present in your tone. If you want to soothe, speak from breath, from pause, from restraint. The voice communicates what words don't say. And in that silent gap, the listener decides whether to believe you or not. That's why it's not just about what you say, but how you make it resonate. Many great speakers don't have the best diction, but they have something much more powerful, emotional authenticity in their voice. Because the voice that impacts is not the most perfect, but the most honest, the most alive, the most connected. All of the above may seem technical, but it's not about memorizing formulas. It's about practicing with intention. Record yourself. Listen to yourself. Observe yourself. Do you sound flat? Do you rush? Do you shout without realizing it? Does your tone not reflect what you feel? The clues are there. Not to judge you, but to fine-tune it. Because your voice is like a musical instrument, and you are its musician. And the difference between an ordinary voice and an unforgettable one is in the details. In how you pause before a key idea. In how you slightly raise your volume when stating a truth. In how you soften your tone when delivering a personal story. That sensitivity is developed with conscious practice. You don't need to sound like a broadcaster or fake a character. You just need to know yourself, connect with your message, and train your expression until your voice and your intention walk hand in hand. Remember that the voice is one of the oldest tools of human connection. Since before writing, the voice was the vehicle of knowledge, emotion, and transformation. Today, it remains that way. And if you learn to use it, you won't just be able to speak better. You'll be able to touch hearts, inspire minds, and leave a lasting impression every time you express yourself. Because your voice has power. You just have to claim it, train it, and put it to work for something bigger than your fears. And that, right there, is where true influence begins. Chapter 11. Communication in High-Impact Environments. Leadership, Negotiation, Crisis. Communicating in high-impact environments is the ultimate test of emotional intelligence, mental clarity, and verbal mastery. It's there when decisions matter, when tensions rise, and all eyes are on you, that your way of speaking can make the difference between chaos and order, between respect and doubt, between true leadership and the loss of authority. And communicating under pressure isn't just a talent. It's a skill that requires training. Pressure reveals what's inside. If what's inside you is calm, clarity, and conviction, that's what you'll project. But if what's inside is confusion, fear, or a need for approval, that too will become visible. Therefore, before speaking in a critical situation, the real work begins within you. Your internal state is the root of your communicative power. Speaking clearly under pressure requires first training your mind so it doesn't automatically react to stress. In times of crisis, most people go into reactive mode. They talk too much, interrupt, justify themselves, or go blank. The first step is to breathe and regain focus. Strategic silence, a brief pause before responding, has a dual effect. It calms your nervous system and generates presence with others. A person who doesn't rush to speak under pressure conveys control. And that control is interpreted as authority. That's why, in high-impact environments, speaking less and with more intention is an advantage. Every word must be measured, clear, and aligned with your core message. Rambling undermines credibility. Precision elevates you. When you lead teams or speak to crowds, your tone is just as important as your content. It's not just about what you say, but how you make them feel. Your voice should be firm but not rigid, warm but not submissive. A voice that projects authority comes from steady breathing, an erect spine, and a mind that doesn't doubt its own worth. Your audience unconsciously perceives all of this. You may not be the most extroverted, but if your message has intention, structure, and emotional energy, you'll make an impact. Never forget that people don't remember every word you said, but they do remember how you made them feel. And if you make them feel guided, safe, or inspired, your communication will have fulfilled its purpose. In negotiation situations, the key skill isn't convincing, it's holding the center. Those who need to convince have lost power. Those who can maintain their emotional balance while the other side moves gain real influence. Negotiation isn't a fight, it's a psychological dance. You must listen deeply, validate without giving in, and respond clearly. It's not about always winning, but about building agreements where your voice isn't betrayed. To achieve this, you must know your non-negotiables. What values won't you compromise? What conditions are essential? If you're clear about this before entering the conversation, you won't lose your center when the pressure comes. Because pressure, at its core, is an opportunity to show who you really are. An effective technique for communicating with authority in these scenarios is to use the language of vision and responsibility. Speak from what you want to build, not from what you fear. Instead of saying, "This could go wrong," say, "This is what we need to ensure for it to work." Instead of assigning blame, focus on solutions. Instead of emotional reactions, offer a broader perspective. This doesn't mean you should repress your emotion, but rather channel it. Emotion expressed intelligently becomes magnetism. Emotion that overflows without direction destroys your message. That's why, in crisis environments, great communicators are not cold, but conscious. They know that their words can reassure an entire team or exacerbate conflict. And that's why they choose each phrase carefully. A powerful strategy in times of high tension is framing. Framing the conversation from the start gives it direction. If you're going to have a difficult conversation with a team, start by saying, "My intention today is for us to leave here with a clear direction, even if the process is uncomfortable." That lowers defenses and builds anticipation. Framing is how you guide others' interpretations. A leader who frames well leads the narrative. And in high-impact communication, leading the narrative is crucial. Because you can't always control what happens, but you can influence how it's interpreted. And that's power. You must also know when not to speak. In certain situations, silence is the most powerful form of presence. There are times when, faced with a difficult question, the best thing you can do is pause, breathe, and respond from a clearer inner space. That pause isn't weakness. It's an implicit declaration that you're not reacting, you're choosing. And choosing your word is an act of power. Every time you speak under pressure from a place of calm, you're reprogramming your mind to know that you can sustain yourself even in the midst of chaos. Finally, communicating with authority and presence in critical moments doesn't mean you won't feel fear or discomfort. It means you don't let those emotions control you. It means you develop a level of awareness so deep that you can observe your emotion and still choose your response. True communicative leadership is based on that awareness. Knowing what you're projecting, what you're generating in others, and what you're transmitting with your energy. When you develop that sensitivity, you don't need to shout to be heard, or impose to be respected. You become a reference, not because of your volume, but because of your clarity. And that, in high-impact environments, is what transforms noise into direction and tension into opportunity. Chapter 12. Master the psychology of everyday conversation. In the art of speaking intelligently, there's one sphere that's often overlooked: everyday conversation. Those seemingly simple conversations over coffee, in line at the supermarket, or when exchanging words with a colleague. These brief interactions, far from being irrelevant, are the true training ground for becoming exceptional communicators. It's in everyday life that our conversational intelligence is put to the test without embellishment, without prior preparation, without a script. And precisely for this reason, mastering the psychology of these interactions is a skill that transforms not only how others see us, but also how we feel in our closest relationships and broader social connections. Connecting emotionally in everyday life doesn't require complicated words or elaborate speeches. It requires attention. It requires presence. It requires emotional willingness. The first step to achieving that deep connection is understanding that every person, no matter how fleeting the encounter, wants to be seen, heard, and validated. And if you can provide that experience, even if it's just for a few minutes, that person will remember that moment with you as something special. Listening empathetically, maintaining genuine eye contact, and showing genuine interest in what the other person is saying are small acts that have a disproportionate impact on the quality of any conversation. But let's go further. Meaningful conversations don't appear out of nowhere. They are created. They are cultivated. And for that, it's vital to learn to ask questions that open the door to the other person's inner world. Questions that don't simply seek quick answers, but rather invite exploration of emotions, ideas, and experiences. Questions like, what was the most challenging thing about your week? Or, what's something that made you smile lately? Have the power to break through superficiality and go directly to the other person's emotional core. This not only transforms an ordinary conversation into a memorable experience, but also strengthens the relationship on levels that aren't immediately visible, but that are felt in the trust, closeness, and reciprocity that emerges over time. And this is where micro-skills come into play. Those small, conscious actions that seem insignificant, but when repeated consistently, change the entire tone of our interactions. For example, nodding your head while someone is speaking conveys attention without interrupting. Repeating a key word from what the other person said, as a mirror, shows them that you understood. Using pauses instead of filling them with filler words makes you appear more thoughtful. Modulating your tone of voice to the emotional rhythm of the conversation, softer when there are sensitive topics, firmer when clarity is needed, makes you emotionally attuned. These micro-skills are like invisible tools that, when applied well, turn anyone into a magnetic communicator. It's also essential to learn to read between the lines. Because often what a person says isn't exactly what they mean. For example, someone might complain about traffic, but they're actually expressing general frustration with their routine. Or someone might talk about their boss, but what they're really seeking is validation about their professional worth. This is where emotional sensitivity comes in. The ability to listen beyond words, to grasp the underlying emotional message. And when you respond at that deep level, the other person perceives it, values it, and the conversation goes from trivial to transformative. Everyday conversation is also a direct path to positive influence. You don't need to be in a boardroom or in front of an audience to inspire. You can do it with a kind gesture, an uplifting story, or a brief but powerful piece of advice. By understanding the other person's emotional state and adjusting your language to that state, you achieve a rapport that elevates the conversation. This is how ordinary interactions become extraordinary moments. And you can be the source of those moments, again and again, with awareness, practice, and empathy. Mastering this psychology also means learning how to gracefully close a conversation. Knowing when to end, how to express gratitude, and how to leave the other person feeling refreshed and energized. This requires social intelligence and emotional clarity. It's not always about leaving a brilliant one-liner. Sometimes a sincere smile and a simple phrase like, "Thank you for sharing that with me, I really appreciate it." That kind of closing leaves an emotional mark that remains long after the conversation is over. Ultimately, Understanding the psychology of everyday conversation means understanding that there are no small conversations when there's intention behind them. Every word carries weight. Every gesture communicates. Every glance builds or destroys invisible bridges. And you decide, with every interaction, what kind of bridge you want to build. This skill will not only improve your personal relationships, but will make you someone people want to be around, someone with whom they feel seen, understood, and valued. And that's a powerful, subtle, and deeply human way to exert real influence in the world. Chapter 13: Verbal Intelligence in the Digital Age. How to communicate on networks, messages, and video. In the digital age, verbal intelligence is no longer exclusive to face-to-face communication. Today, those who master on-screen language, whether written or spoken, have an overwhelming advantage. Because now, more than ever, we communicate through screens. Text messages, emails, social media posts, voice notes, video calls, podcasts, on-camera videos. All of these channels require an adaptation of our way of expressing ourselves. It's no longer enough to speak well in person. You have to know how to write with your voice, speak naturally on camera, and convey confidence and clarity, even when you're not physically present. The challenge is clear. How do you maintain your authenticity, your communicative power, and your emotional impact in an environment where nonverbal cues are diminished or completely lost? The first key to developing digital verbal intelligence is understanding the medium. Writing a text message is not the same as composing a professional email. Recording a video for social media is not the same as participating in a work video conference. Each platform has its own language, its own rhythm, its own communication expectations. Adapting to that context is a clear sign of intelligence. On social media, for example, attention span is fleeting, which is why your words must be precise, direct, and emotional. In a WhatsApp message, the way you use punctuation, emojis, or even silences between responses can completely change the tone of what you say. Therefore, mastery of written language is no longer a matter of grammatical rules alone, but of digital emotional sensitivity. Speaking on camera, on the other hand, has become an essential skill. Whether you're recording content, leading virtual meetings, or simply sending an inspiring voice message, you need to know how to sound authentic and confident when speaking in front of a screen. This isn't about acting, but about unleashing your presence. The camera amplifies both your clarity and your hesitations, so it's essential to learn to maintain eye contact with the lens, as if it were a person. Maintain a natural rhythm when speaking, take care of your posture and energy, and, above all, connect with your message before trying to communicate it. When you're convinced of what you're saying, the camera transmits it. If you're hesitating or faking, it does too. The difference lies in conscious practice. Record yourself, review it, listen to your tone, notice your body language. Correct with intention. Improve every time. One of the most common mistakes in digital communication is assuming the other person will understand exactly what we meant. But the text lacks tone. And what you consider neutral can sound cold. What you think is funny can be interpreted as sarcastic. This is where the ability to anticipate how the other person might read or hear your message comes in. Before sending an important text, reread it through the eyes of the other person. Ask yourself, could it come across as harsh? Could it be misinterpreted? Is there a more empathetic way to say it? A small change in wording can make the difference between generating conflict or connection. Even a simple, "How are you?" at the beginning of a message can completely humanize a digital conversation. Writing with voice is another art that few master. It means that when someone reads your words, they feel like they're listening. Your message must have rhythm, authenticity, and emotion. To achieve this, write like you speak. Use short sentences, questions, pauses, words you use in real life. And, above all, make your texts intentional. Every paragraph, every line, every sentence should have a purpose. To inform, excite, inspire, or motivate. Don't write to fill space. Write to move others, to trigger an emotion or an action. That is true digital communication with impact. Convey trust online from the first word. Don't apologize unnecessarily. Don't use phrases that minimize your message, like, "Maybe this sounds silly," or "I don't know if this makes sense." If you don't trust your words, no one else will. Be clear. Be direct. Be human. And at the same time, maintain your warmth. Courtesy isn't rigidity. It's emotional presence. Say, "Thank you for your time. I value your opinion. I'm here if you need anything." These simple yet authentic phrases create closeness despite the distance. When you speak on camera or on a video call, remember that your tone, your gaze, and your energy are more important than technical perfection. People don't connect with impeccable content. They connect with reality. So showcase your pauses, your smiles, your moments of reflection. Use your voice as an emotional instrument. Play with volume, speed, and intention. And if you feel nervous, focus on the other person. Think about what you want to contribute. When your attention shifts from yourself to serving the other person, fear dissolves. That's the formula for speaking powerfully, even through a screen. And finally, remember, digital connection is no less human. It's simply a different form of presence. A presence you can train, expand, and refine. Verbal intelligence in the digital world isn't about being perfect, but about being intentional. Every word counts. Every message can be an opportunity to inspire, unite, or create something new. And you have that tool in your hands, every day, every time you communicate in this connected world. Harness that power. Because those who communicate well digitally influence the invisible. And that, today, is true leadership. Chapter 14. Close with a Bang. How to end conversations with impact. Ending a conversation intelligently isn't simply about saying goodbye or see you later. It's a strategic, emotional, and deeply human skill. In life, we don't always remember exactly what someone said, but we do remember how they made us feel. And in that last moment of a conversation, in that closing, is the perfect moment to leave a lasting impression. Ending with brilliance isn't about embellishing words with drama or trying to be artificially memorable. It's about having the sensitivity and intention to end with clarity, respect, and, above all, purpose. Because the end of a conversation, like the closing of a book or the conclusion of a movie, is what often determines the flavor left behind by the entire experience. And you can learn to master it. A well-concluded conversation conveys respect for the other person's time, for what we shared, and for what may arise in the future. It's an act of conscious presence. It's saying to the other person, "What we exchanged was valuable, and you deserve a dignified farewell." These types of closings don't require long or grandiloquent words. They require authenticity. For example, a simple phrase like, "Thank you for this conversation. It helped me see things differently," can be infinitely more powerful than a perfunctory goodbye. Because it conveys gratitude, emotional closure, and recognition. Intelligence in concluding a conversation involves knowing when to stop. Some people extend an interaction beyond its optimal point and end up draining energy instead of elevating it. A good communicator perceives emotional rhythms and knows how to read the right moment to say, "That's enough for today." This awareness not only enhances the other person's experience, but also preserves your own energy and strengthens your presence. The art of closing is also the art of verbal elegance. Knowing how to leave with a good feeling, without leaving loose ends, without the need for drama. Now, let's talk about phrases that open doors even when they're closing conversations. Not all goodbyes have to be a full stop. Often, the right closing sows the seed for the next conversation. Phrases like, "I'd love to continue talking about this another time," or, "What you said got me thinking, I'll let you know what I'm drawing from it later," not only bring closure but also invite continuity. This type of language projects value in the future, recognizes the depth of the exchange, and keeps interest alive. This is how lasting relationships are created, with small, intentional actions that, when repeated consistently, leave an emotional mark that's impossible to ignore. It's also essential to close with emotional alignment. If the conversation was lighthearted and fun, your closing should resonate with that lightheartedness. "You made me laugh more than I expected. Thank you for that." If it was a serious or vulnerable conversation, close with empathy and connection, "I really appreciate you sharing that with me." Leaving a mark isn't about impressing. It's about connecting through emotional honesty. And when your final words are aligned with the energy of the conversation, the other person leaves with a sense of harmony, as if everything fell into place perfectly. That feeling is powerful because it creates positive memories that become associated with you. Of course, in more formal settings, meetings, work calls, interviews, you can also close with impact, without losing the professional structure. Phrases like, "Thank you for your time. I really appreciate what you shared, and I'm taking away some important ideas to reflect on," or, "I'm sure this will make a difference in what we're building," not only close the conversation but also reinforce the seriousness and purpose of the discussion. These phrases, although formal, humanize the interaction and convey commitment and consideration. A brilliant closing in professional settings also includes clarity about the next steps. So, let's leave it at that. I'll send you the summary, and we'll coordinate for next week, leaving a sense of direction and leadership in what was agreed upon. But it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. Body language, tone of voice, the time you take to close. All of this communicates. A smile at the end, a warm or serene tone, a farewell that doesn't sound rushed or robotic. These details aren't optional. They are the emotional wrapping of your words. And that wrapping is what the other person unknowingly stores away. Often, that small moment of farewell defines whether the other person wants to speak to you again or not. That's how crucial it can be. That's why training your closing, just as you train your opening and your body when speaking, is a direct investment in your power of connection. Closing well also involves knowing how to accept silence. Sometimes, there's nothing more to say. Sometimes, a simple gesture, a kind look, or even a "take care of yourself" is enough. And that's okay. Because silence is also language. It's a closure that doesn't interrupt the other person's emotional experience, but rather accompanies it with respect. Learning to sense when silence is more powerful than a phrase is one of the clearest signs of communicative maturity. Not everything has to be said, but everything can be closed with awareness. Ultimately, what truly makes a difference in closing is the intention. What is your intention when you say goodbye? To leave a positive impression? To provide clarity? To convey affection, respect, or commitment? When your intention is clear, your words find their natural shape, and the other person senses it. Because people may forget your exact words, but they won't forget how you made them feel when you leave. And if you can leave them feeling appreciated, clear, and connected, then you've closed with brilliance. Not because you impressed, but because you honored the moment. Close with respect. Close with presence. Close with intention. Because every conversation that ends well opens the door to a stronger, more sincere, and more powerful relationship. Learning this art will make you unforgettable in the minds of others. And that's what someone who masters the art of thinking quickly before speaking achieves. They leave a mark, even when they leave. Conclusion: intelligent communication is a path to inner power. When we reach the end of this path, we realize that intelligent communication is not simply a tool for expressing ourselves better, influencing others, or achieving social success. It is, at its deepest core, a path of self-knowledge, inner mastery, and personal expansion. Because every word we choose, every pause we take, and every emotion we manage to convey clearly not only reveals who we are, it also actively constructs who we are becoming. Speaking intelligently is not a single act or an empty persuasion tactic. It is a living expression of our consciousness, our inner power, our ability to connect with others from an authentic and transformative place. Reflecting on everything you've learned throughout this audiobook is vital to consolidating it. We discussed the importance of listening mindfully, thinking clearly before speaking, managing our emotions, and reading other signals to communicate with respect and precision. We talk about the power of silence, the impact of a clear intention, and the art of influencing without manipulating, creating connection without imposing, and expressing ourselves confidently without overpowering. All of these elements, combined, form a new way of being in the world. One that doesn't depend on having a loud voice or flowery vocabulary, but on having mental clarity, emotional presence, and an authentic purpose in every interaction. When you understand that communication doesn't begin in the mouth, but in the mind and heart, everything changes. Your way of speaking becomes more conscious, your listening deeper, your ability to interpret more acute. You stop reacting impulsively and begin responding strategically. You stop looking for the last word to win and start searching for the right word to transform. You stop seeing communication as a race to impress and begin to see it as a dance that connects, builds, and uplifts. The personal transformation that occurs when you learn to speak intelligently isn't just evident in your way of expressing yourself. It's evident in how your relationships change, in how others perceive you, and in how you begin to feel more like yourself in every conversation. It shows up in that interview where you confidently convey your value, in that conflict where you can set boundaries without losing your cool, in that casual conversation where you manage to touch someone's heart effortlessly. It's a feeling of quiet power, an inner certainty that you no longer need to shout to be heard, or pretend to be accepted, or dominate to be influential. This type of communication allows you not only to live better, but to lead with greater impact. Because a leader isn't the one who talks the most, but the one who best knows what to say, how to say it, and when to be silent. They're the ones who actively listen, who uplift with their words, and who build bridges instead of walls. They're the ones who transform a no into an opportunity and a disagreement into a point of growth. They're the ones who make others feel seen, understood, and valued. Therefore, everything changes in your life when you learn to speak intelligently. It changes the way you think. It changes the way you relate to others. It changes the way you see yourself. You no longer feel insecure in front of an audience, nor fearful of criticism, nor limited when you want to express an important idea. You begin to enjoy the act of communicating. You begin to use words as tools for construction. And you discover with amazement that many times, when you manage to express yourself clearly, you also manage to discover yourself more deeply. So the challenge that remains for you now isn't memorizing techniques or repeating formulas. The real challenge is practicing mindfully. It's turning everything you've learned into a way of life. Speaking intelligently isn't a one-time act. It's a daily decision. It's choosing every day to be clearer rather than confusing, more genuine than artificial, more conscious than reactive. It's remembering that in every conversation, you have the opportunity to transform, connect, and lead. Take this message with you. Your voice is an extension of your inner power. Your communication is the bridge between your mind and the world. And when you choose to speak intelligently, you don't just make yourself understood. You make yourself respected, you make yourself felt, and, above all, you make yourself unforgettable. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to continue delving deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click here, and I'll see you there.